Alright, in this lesson we're going to take a look at the water cycle. You can see here I've got a diagram of the water cycle, an unlabeled diagram. Students will see something similar to this on a quiz where they'll have to know kind of the main parts to the water cycle. And there we go. Our big idea is that the sun's warming relates to weather, climate, and the water cycle. We've talked about weather and climate in previous lessons, or we'll talk about them. In this one we're going to focus on the water cycle and how energy from the sun kind of drives that and is the force that kind of keeps it moving. The water cycle. Kind of start off here by talking about what it is. Water is always circulating or moving throughout the four spheres of the earth in what is known as the water cycle. Other textbooks or websites also refer to it as the hydrologic cycle. Two names, same idea. And so the water cycle really is just describing that movement of water on, above, and below the surface of the earth. Evaporation and transpiration. So when we talk about the water cycle, we do kind of have some long terminology, some big vocabulary words, and here are our first couple. Evaporation is when the sun heats up water in rivers or lakes or even in the ocean and then turns liquid water into gas form, or the gas state of water. And water in a gas form is called water vapor. Water vapor will leave the river, lake, or ocean and rise up into the air. Plants do something that's called transpiration. They start by absorbing or taking in water from the soil and then moving it throughout the plant to all of its parts. Sometimes they have excess water or extra water, and that water will actually leave the plant through openings in the leaves, and that process of water kind of coming in and being kind of let back out is called transpiration. Condensation in clouds. Condensation takes place high in the atmosphere and at ground level. Water vapor rises and cools, collecting around little particles of dust, smoke, or salt to form little water droplets. So changing from water gas back to water droplets is called condensation. This process also happens close to the ground, or can happen close to the ground. When it does that, we call that fog. Fog develops when air with a relatively high humidity, in other words moist air, comes in contact with something that is colder, such as the Earth's surface. If it cools down to the dew point, again it changes from being a water gas into little droplets of water. Additional cooling can also lead to condensation and growth of low-level clouds. Clouds, and again in summary here then, clouds form in the atmosphere because air containing water vapor rises and then cools off. Okay? If you've ever been in fog, you can honestly say that you've had your head in the clouds. Precipitation. Droplets, cloud droplets or ice crystals can grow heavy enough to actually fall through the air. When it does that, we call that precipitation. They can grow by colliding and sticking with other little droplets and particles that are in the atmosphere. They start moving around faster and collecting more small droplets as they get larger, and again eventually become heavy enough that they fall out of the cloud and fall out of the sky in the form of rain, sleet, hail, snow, and we call that precipitation. Runoff and infiltration. Rain can fall on saturated ground, which means that the ground has so much water in it that it can't hold anymore. And when it falls on that type of ground or falls on a very, very hard surface, we call that impervious or impermeable, the water will just kind of roll off it and flow over top of it. That is what we call runoff. it can also soak down into the ground. Infiltration is when that precipitation starts to soak into the ground. Again, infiltration, just kind of another fancy science word, big science word for the idea of soaking in. And that water can soak down into the shallow soil, and given enough time, gravity will actually pull it farther down into the soil and truly turn it into what we call groundwater.